Okay, here we are. Whew, this is a hard act to follow after Dr. Dean and the panel, but we'll try. The last thing of today. So, what's happening, Ferris? Are you joining our panel? Here, Oh. Oh, I see. Okay. Is this okay? All right. So we're really going to have a conversation about a few future trends of simulation. Okay, here's your panelists today. You probably recognize most of them. So a few topics, and then we'll leave it open to have a conversation about other ideas for future trends. We're going to talk a little bit about changes due to COVID and what is here to stay in the future, gamification, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence, and last, the integration of diversity, equity, inclusion, and trauma-informed care. Okay, so changes due to COVID. Okay, panelists. What changes due to COVID are here to stay in the future from your perspectives?
Anyone can start. This is not on either. Can you hear me? Okay. So I talked earlier about mock codes, and what I mentioned to you is that we used to do them 4 times a month on day shift and night shift in actual patient rooms, in what we used to like to call empty patient rooms, and we no longer have empty rooms. There is almost no chance that we can actually do these in situ code blue because of the way the hospital is. And it's not directly related to COVID, but more related to the fact that our state lacks enough hospital beds, and particularly ICU beds, for our population. And since COVID, it has been relentless. And there's so many things that I would love to do, simulation-wise. Bring a mannequin in, put them on a ventilator. They all now are done near the hospital. They'll be in the formal simulation center, in the Multnomah Pavilion Simulation Center, which are great, but it's not the same as actually being in situ. It also is harder for people to leave their authentic roles if they have to go so far away. That is absolutely here to stay. You know, now thankfully we're not having to PPE up for every piece of simulation, but simulation during the pandemic, we had to necessarily halt a lot of simulation efforts. We didn't have enough PPE at all. And I was extremely lucky because my ventilation simulation was considered necessary, and I was allowed to do it. But we didn't use full PPE because the mannequin's not going to infect us with COVID, but we still all had to have our masks and our shields and the things that kept us safe from each other. So a lot of that has still lingered. Is that reasonable?
Thank you, yes.
A few things that come to mind for me that are staying for several years post-pandemic are challenges with workforce that for me directly impact how we need simulation when it comes to capacity. We have a high turnover and a lot of competition with recruitment and challenges in retention, and there are multiple factors for that, but some examples just coming up for me and the nursing team are that we are currently experiencing high transition and turnover rates. We have new staffing laws coming into our state that require more nurses at the bedside to give breaks for rests and meals. We have different staffing ratios coming into our state. These are all being passed by state laws. And we have a new tower that we're opening in the next year and a half. So in an already post-pandemic workforce shortage that is post-pandemic, but also was trending that way anyway, and it was just exacerbated by this crisis, this generation and even our generation perceives working very differently when it comes to working as a significant priority in life. And so the way that people want to work, the environment they want to work in, joy and meaning, well-being, hours, pay, PTO, people can survive on a little bit less to gain a little bit more of something else in life. And I think that is here to stay. I think that we are going to continue to see more challenges in workforce, and I literally feel like I'm contacting Lish every week to say, this is up, this is down, we need to move this over here. How about this? Thank you so much, Lish. It's just constant. We are planning out really far what our utilization needs are going to be, and we're going to be hiring 450 FTE of nurses in the next year. So that's a large amount when we are already short, and it's not going to change in the next 5 to 10 years. The other thing on top of that is skill mix. In that workforce change and in that reality, our skill mix index and our case index have gone this way. So we have sicker patients at a higher pace with more work intensity and lower experience of workforce. We got a whole night shift that's maybe less than 2 years of experience, but they're the same patients the day shift's taking care of. And so I professionally, sometimes personally, rely so much on the SimOps, the Sim team, the Sim group from an organizational level to be an ally and a resource in solving this problem for patients in our community so that OHSU can deliver quality care to the patients in our community. And it's important that the SIM vision and strategy includes the realities of the workforce at every discipline, and that we're all committed to providing excellent, safe, quality care to patients, and everyone is needed to do that.
I saw a lot of nods out there. So we're going to switch over here. Lish wants to comment, and then we go to Emma.
I think one of the biggest changes in my personal workflow is that I am able to work from home once or twice a week, which is very different than what happened before. And one of the reasons why I am able to work from home is that we have so many virtual meetings. It used to be we didn't have virtual meetings unless we were trying to meet with colleagues that lived in different countries or different parts of the United States. And now I spend almost all day every Monday in virtual meetings. We also have some virtual trainings, like our dry runs, right, Emma? Yeah.
Yeah, Our biggest change in the SP world has been to make all of the trainings, most of our dry runs, not all of them, most of them, they were virtual during the pandemic, and they've stayed virtual. And it lets us be more agile, and it lets us say, hey, we only need an hour of your time. And faculty can become more involved and have more availability when they don't need to run down the hill to the tram, get on the tram, go down the hill, come find us. It gives us flexibility. And we also then can record those trainings. So now we have 2 years plus of recorded trainings. And when we have people who miss the trainings or folks who are new, faculty who's new to SIM and want to see what the trainings look like, we can just send them the link, and it makes things much more sustainable and scalable. And then we are also implementing quality and feedback and assurance work through SPs being able to look at their videos from home. So the same way that we're doing remote work, the SPs are able to do some remote work and do reflections from home, and they don't need to come to the center and do it. And it frees up not just space, but also they can do it on their own time. and it doesn't require us to negotiate time to come in for that. So it's been helpful.
Okay, well, thank you for that conversation. Oh, we have one more. I was going to add too that I think flexibility. People are, there's this need to be able to pivot and switch things sometimes, and I think that is probably here to stay.
Yeah, so one of my clinical roles, I provide telemedicine ICU support to many small hospitals in Oregon. And you're already a 53 hospital system? So, yeah, 58, oh wow. Yeah, every time I ask, it's bigger. Oregon, I'm gonna say our whole state does not even have as much a population as Bangkok does. But many, if not most of our hospitals are tiny, very small, 20 beds, 4 ICU beds. They cannot possibly have the expertise that we do. And I've been providing, not just me, but my whole team, we provide the expertise on the telemedicine. But there is a huge role, I think, to simulation in how we optimize this. And it's here to stay. Patients that, we have no room to bring patients in anymore. We need to be able to teach them how to take care of patients as best they can. And I've already talked to some of our simulation friends about bringing our show on the road with the ventilator and the mannequin, because the idea would be, I can do asynchronous lectures, but what I want to do is bring sim to them. Use their ventilators, have their champions, so that when I'm gone, they can teach in our absence. And I think that is something actually we really piloted with you guys, right? You guys sent us the cream of the crop, and you brought the message back to Thailand, and we have a publication now. Right before COVID hit, we got 40-something learners who went through all the training, and that's what the model we'd like to use in Oregon. I think it's something that's absolutely here to stay.
So when you're gone means you retire or you win the lottery, correct? Okay. Okay, so another future trend is around something that you heard Alicia and Emma talk about earlier, which is gamification, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence. Next slide. So a few definitions. Oh, I found Mr. Potato Head that Emma talked about earlier. Gamification is taking something that is not designed to be a game and incorporating elements of gaming. Virtual reality is a simulated experience that employs pose tracking and 3D near-eye displays to give the user an immersive feel of a virtual world. And artificial intelligence refers to the simulation of human intelligence in computers, enabling them to perform tasks that typically require human intelligence, such as decision-making, problem-solving, and learning. Or as Emma said, some mannequins now are following her with their eyes. So, next slide. Questions to the panel. How do you think gamification, virtual reality, and/or artificial intelligence may impact the way we deliver simulation in the future? Bum, bum, bum. Any takers? Or what are you kind of doing in this world, which I know you've spoken to some of these pieces.
I think that integrating the gamification concepts into the simulation curriculum is a creative, fun, and innovative way to engage adult learners, and being able to just integrate those kinds of concepts, whether you're doing clinical skills integration or high fidelity sim, can be really, I think, beneficial. The other thing I was thinking about, I was chatting with Stephanie, and she was looking at RQI. There's going to be, I think, advancements in basic systems or high utilization needs like resuscitation, changes in technology with computer-based or some type of AI that allows us to evaluate comfort and competence with BLS. Like BLS RQI is a relatively newer technology that's going to decrease the workload and space utilization and organizational demand to ensure that all your employees are BLS ready, right? So thinking about where BLS has transitioned in our lifetime as clinicians and where it's going, that has to do with this concept of dedicating and investing in gamification and virtual reality and AI. And so I think we haven't even dreamed up the possibilities of what those things can do for a simulation program. I think it's coming in the next 2 to 5 years, and we're going to see it become more affordable and something that really has a value proposition to it. But we're just, like, I think, on the edge of something beyond what we have right now.
I speak with a lot of SP educators around the country, and some of them are really, really afraid of virtual reality and AI. They think it's going to be that programs will see it as cheaper than sustaining an SP pool, and that it'll be kind of taken over. And I think that that is the wrong mentality. I think that we can utilize virtual reality and AI as part of the spectrum of simulation. So where we put novice learners or more complex outcomes, and where we have different needs for, this is a great role play, this is a great mannequin-based sim, this is a virtual reality sim, this is a virtual reality patient. Like maybe those first-year med students could just talk to a virtual reality patient, and then they come in and talk with an SP. Because the ultimate goal is not to have a learner have an SP experience. The ultimate goal is to have a learner be prepared to talk with a real patient. So no matter where they start, we can use different tools at different times, depending on the level of the learner and the competency of the learner, to provide simulation in different ways. But the ultimate goal is still going to be that patient interaction. So no matter how much technology we have and how many steps we can put between us and the patient, at the end of the day, we still need to see that patient. And so I think we can use it as a tool, and I think people need to get on board because it is coming.
Any other
I
thoughts?
have a thought. In terms of both virtual reality and artificial intelligence, we've talked a lot about really complex and progressive simulations, and they often pretty much have to rely on very high-level content experts who can pivot in the moment when a learner makes a choice. I think there's going to be some opportunities to have AI support for that, because for me, when a learner chooses something that is off script, I want to follow that, because that's what they're going to do in real life. That's what they're going to try to do for a real patient. And of course, we want to do it in sim where it's safe. And we love when they play out, for lack of a better term, the wrong decision or a potentially dangerous decision, because the learning is great. But it is hard to have enough of a pool of instructors who can pivot with them. And I think having AI support us is something that's definitely going to come. The branching logic, right? Using AI to say, oh, there are multiple choices here, and we can branch off here, and also we can come back to the main branch at this point. I think that's going to be very helpful. I don't know how we're going to get there, but smart people will figure that out.
I can't remember how long ago it was, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago, the first time I actually thought about artificial intelligence enhancing my career in simulation. I was randomly looking for things on YouTube that had to do with simulation, and I found a company in Singapore was creating a robot that had artificial intelligence, and her name was Nadine, and they had created her to be a receptionist at a company. So she sat at the front desk, and it was, at the time, one of the most realistic looking robots I'd ever seen. She had facial expressions. She could move her lips when you talked to her. When you would walk in and you introduced yourself to her, she would always remember who you were the next time you came in. She could shake your hand. And I just thought, wow, this is really cool. It's kind of scary. And the more I go to simulation conferences and I see the different kind of human patient simulators they're coming out with, they're getting more and more like that. Like Emma was saying, there are some simulators from Gamard specifically that have eye tracking, and when you walk by them, their eyes will follow you. One of the newer HAL mannequins, their most recent model, not only does his eyes track with you, but like he can shake your hand and squeeze your hand, and if you ask him certain questions, he has canned responses and will respond to what you're saying. And so I think in the next few years, we're going to see a lot more of that, and I'm very curious to see where it goes.
Thank you. So this next one could be a whole day conversation, but we do just want to touch on this as our final thought on future trends. Absolutely, this is next year topic. So, and also an area of my interest in my dissertation research. So, integration of diversity, equity, inclusion, and trauma-informed care. So what can we do to incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion, and trauma-informed care in simulation? Broad question, very broad question. We'll come to that. Just general thoughts, panelists.
So this has been an organizational commitment from OHSU, and a lot of efforts have been done to do some consulting externally to evaluate where we are as an organization with DEI and also JEDI, to understand what our culture is like and where there are opportunities in a transparent way to address some of those. We have a lot of work to do in this area still, but I think there is an organizational commitment which then really supports program work and divisions and departments to prioritize the effort based on the evidence out there and the lived experience of the employees in that area. And so I think when it comes to simulation, we've been more intentional about applying the evidence when it comes to the fidelity and the safety of the environment, but I think also just thinking about, particularly when you think about post-pandemic and the integration of technology and the changes of the workforce that I mentioned, things like trauma-informed care and well-being as two different needs, and just I think the sense in the world that people are feeling right now, I think it becomes even more important to prioritize this effort and in recognition and acknowledgement, but also in action. And so evaluating, are there simulation scenarios within your curriculum that specifically address this? Maybe it can be about your hiring practices, which we know we still have to work on. Maybe it can be about just inclusion, as simple as inclusion of different team members in trying to ensure you're meeting the needs of the customer to ensure that the outcomes are getting met. So there's a lot of different ways these things can be considered. It's just, where are you from an organizational standpoint, from a system standpoint, in prioritizing this effort, and then how do you apply those best practices and lived experience into your programs?
Alicia, you mentioned, aside from DEI, you said JEDI, J-E-D-I. So could you expand on that?
So JEDI, we've been expanding on justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So DEI has been the way forward, and now there's been an addition of a J, so to include justice, so JDEI, justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, JEDI.
The acronyms change a lot.
They change a lot, and we're learning. Yes, belonging, wellness, well-being. I think that we're all trying to do our best, and learn and grow, and I think we're all committed to that or we wouldn't be here. And the acronyms keep changing and we keep learning more.
So yesterday, Alicia, you brought up your introduction to SIM and normalizing, and if you need to step out, has anyone had an experience? That sends a powerful message when your leaders are actually making a space at the beginning for people to say, yes, I have had an experience, or to normalize, like some people in this room may have significant experiences in the area of clinical care we're talking about. And it shouldn't just be in SIM, this should be, and it is often, I've been in many clinical meetings in the hospital where now people are very deliberate. And I think building this in so that our learners, our staff, everybody sees it and hears it across the board is a very powerful message and is a way for us to improve. So I think that's here to stay and to expand.
The last thing I wanted to say on this was that one of the pieces that we're exploring that we have not implemented yet, and that will be very difficult to implement, but I think is important, and where the conversation is going around simulation design and scenario design, is that we talk about clinical content experts, we talk about simulation content experts. There's a third member of the team there, and that is the community content expert. So when we have it should be for every case, but when we have a scenario that faculty comes to us and says, hey, I have a patient and we want to write a case about that patient. And they say, I've treated this type of patient 1,000 times before, and this is how this scenario is. What we want to do is make sure that what we're writing about that patient and the person we're creating is reflective and indicative of the lived experience of that person as a person and not as someone sick in a patient lens. And so this is especially true for marginalized populations, and there are many in the US, and folks who are in protected classes. So while I do think in theory this could even be about a diabetes patient, our priority is on our most vulnerable populations, and also the populations where harm has been done by medical communities and there isn't trust. So we think of things like cases that are around human trafficking. We think of things around cases that are around LGBTQ and trans health issues, where we need to have a spokesperson from that community to meet and collaborate with us so that we're not reinforcing stereotypes. Because when we don't know enough, we make assumptions. Even if you're a clinician who's been treating that population for 20 years, sometimes more so. So one of the long-term projects would be to work with a triad, clinical content expert, sim content expert, and community. And right now, we haven't quite got there, but there are some centers in the US that are working towards that. So it's a big ask, but I think it's important.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that the thing we see that happens in our organization is that patient experience data and that patient experience connection, that third part of that triangle gets deprioritized with other internal priorities about our KPIs. And so I think that is a change in moving forward. The future is including the patient voice, including the community voice, and really going out there and seeking that outside of the insulation of our facilities, whether it's the Sim Center facility or the hospital facility. We've maintained a lot of control over those environments in our careers, and that is, there's a different movement around that, about us maintaining that level of control. That was the last thought. I had this chat with Lish. I wonder, Lish, if you would talk about the way the technology has changed around this, how the technology looks, different things that we're doing intentionally about different types of mannequins to represent like our population?
When I first started working in simulation, I went to the sim lab, and I think 99% of our task trainers and simulators were Caucasian. Their skin looked just like mine. And that was not necessarily representative of the population of people who our community serves, nor our learners. And Jessica and I started having conversations with vendors saying things like, when can we have a mannequin that has black skin or tan skin? And they would say things like, oh, well, you know, these are made in Norway, which didn't really seem like an acceptable answer to us. And it wasn't until we started telling them, we're not gonna buy simulators from you until you can offer us a little bit of diversity in your skin tones, and we want to see those represented on your website. We don't want all of the options to look like pale skin. We want them to have a variety of skin tones. And so starting to have those conversations with vendors and asking people about it when we were going to conferences became really important. And I think we've just recently started to see a shift. And we have now quite a range of different skin tones in both our task trainers and our human patient simulators that we have at the Sim Lab. And I think most of our team is kind of on board with the fact that we've had enough Caucasian-looking mannequins for long enough that we're trying to make sure that we're looking for brown and tan skin to fill in the gaps so that our learners and the patients that they're treating have some sort of representation in our simulator inventory.
Thank you. And I found in the literature that the representation matters also for the learners, a sense of belonging and connection to the tools and the modalities that they're interacting with. So thank you all for that. And this last one is simulation and direct patient care, kind of talking about that community member and then into the hospital setting.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly mention one of the things I've been seeing over the last few years, which I think is really interesting use of simulation, is when it's direct parent or patient education. So your learners are patients or parents of patients, caregivers. So one of the issues that folks were having is when you have a baby or a child with very complex medical needs, and you're trying to teach them how to take care of that baby or child at home and how to change a diaper when you have all kinds of cords and lines in. And one of the ways that we could utilize SIM, and that I've seen it in other places in the US, is that you go and bring your neonatal or preemie mannequin and you match whatever you're seeing on the actual baby. And then the parent gets to practice with doing no harm in a safe space to make mistakes, in a way that gives them some confidence and some encouragement and agency when their own child, when they go home. And I've seen it be really impactful. So it's just a really different way to utilize simulation, and it doesn't really cost more because we already have the mannequins in place, right? And so it's just a different kind of outreach, and I think about what else we could do with that process.
Because think about all the lines that little, that little baby can have, that pediatric situation, and they have to navigate that, and they don't do that. This is probably when they're coming in as also a patient and a family, it's particularly in the ICUs, neonatal, pediatric, and adult, it's the worst day and the worst experience of their life. That's not where they were planning to be. So to decrease the cognitive overload and the emotional trauma, and it can be easily applied to neonatal pediatric population. And from the adult side, I think there's definitely opportunities to leverage this type of in situ patient education as part of your curriculum.
To piggyback on that, one of the things when I'm a lung doctor, which I sometimes still do, we have to see if our patients know how to use their inhalers. I don't know if anyone's ever watched it, but almost nobody uses their inhalers correctly. And so instead of saying, "Are you taking your inhalers?" I now say, "Show me, demonstrate how you would use yours." And the act of them showing me teaches me an enormous amount of their medical literacy, about what they can and can't do. I can imagine that if you brought the baby, it's one thing to tell them, this is what we need you to do. It's one thing to have them watch an experienced nurse, but when you watch them go through the motions without somebody just guiding them, I think you'll learn a lot. And that would also feed back into how we teach the next set of patients. Just that sort of aha moment. I never thought my patient would do X. I've seen patients use their inhalers like it's a neck spray. I would never in a million years have guessed that until I saw someone do it. And no shame, because it's on us for not teaching them. But if we never check, we're never going to know.
You know, that makes me think also of, at OHSU, we have child life therapists, and they are therapists that work with the children to teach them what they're going to experience when they go through play, when they're going to go into a surgery, for example. And so they have the dolls and like all sorts of different mechanisms and tools to train those kids. I'm sure you have experience with that as well, before they're going to have procedures and whatnot. Exactly, yeah.
And I just had like one last thought about outcomes, right? We're constantly just showing patients and talking our language, and then going to the next patient and they go on their way, right? We have no way to validate and verify that they were in a position to hear what we had to say, retain what we had to say. We're not even using basic fundamental teaching and learning best practices, let alone the language acquisition they have in the way that we talk. We don't even realize we're talking that way. And so being able to connect this type of program to actual readmissions or clinic visits or those types of things that are particularly related to someone being discharged and seriously not knowing what they're supposed to do when they discharge. They've been told, there's documentation that they've been told this thing. We've in no way validated or verified that any of that is happening. So then they're 2 days later coming back into the ED and they're just like, well, nobody told me that I had to do the diaper this way. Nobody told me I had to flush this line this way. I saw them do it and then I was just terrified I couldn't touch it. So they left it for 2 days. And this is their child or their loved one, or they are the caregiver and they are doing the best they can. And healthcare has changed. It's so complicated. There's so many things, and health literacy has decreased. So there is also a way to our conversations today. Anything you do that you invest in simulation can find a way back to the organization's overall mission and the outcome and an actual KPI. So that's something to just keep in mind. What we're saying here are what's the future, and what doesn't change is how it's connected.
That is a great place to wrap it up. So in terms of, these are just a few of the future trends, and then I also wanted to mention that, scholarly activities, we hope that in our futures together, we continue to partner. So this first one was in 2016 when Alicia and I presented in Singapore with Dr. Wanapa and Young. And Society for Simulation in Healthcare, I know that Lish and Dr. Dean were on a panel, and we've had 2 publications so far that I'm aware of. There may be more coming, but this top one is one that is published on the vent simulation work. Yay. And this second one here is the one that was just approved this past week after, I think about, 18 months of work. So it's very exciting. So we will leave you with that.
Thank you.